The FBI providing a massive update in the assassination of Charlie Kirk, announcing 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, who you are looking at, has been identified as the man responsible for killing Charlie Kirk at a speaking event on Utah Valley University campus. Utah Governor Spencer Cox says a family member was involved in turning Robinson in, with FBI Director Kash Patel commending his team for swiftly bringing this suspect to justice. It was about 33 hours, and they found him.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got him.
This is what happens when you let good cops be cops. The FBI and our partners are proud to stand here today together to bring justice to the family of Charlie Kirk and honor his memory. The suspect was taken into custody at 10 p.m. local time. In less than 36 hours, 33 to be precise, thanks to the full weight of the federal government and leading out with the partners here in the state of Utah and Governor Cox, the suspect was apprehended in a historic time period.
And Kash Patel ended those remarks by saying this to my friend Charlie Kirk: "Rest now, brother. We have the watch." This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany here with my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Emily Campagno. Also joining us, Alicia Acuna, Fox News senior correspondent, and John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, UC Berkeley law professor, and former Justice Thomas law clerk. We begin with Paul Mauro, retired NYPD inspector. He's on the scene. He has been there since yesterday. Paul, we've been keeping in touch, and one of the aspects of this was the Discord messaging that took place between the roommate and between Tyler Robinson. And I just want to list for our viewers what we know about those Discord messages. There was talk about needing to retrieve a weapon from a drop point. There was mention of a weapon in a bush, to visually watch the area. It was wrapped in a towel in this message. Engraved bullets were mentioned as well, a weapon that was unique, a scope, and changed outfits. That seems like a pretty detailed description of what happened in messages with a roommate.
Yes, it does, and it argues perhaps that the roommate was cognizant of what was going to occur or had just occurred, and that's absolutely going to be a very, very focused aspect of this investigation. You can imagine federal government pulling very hard at this. John, you will tell you that almost certainly by now a preservation order has been issued to Discord, which is a gaming app, to make sure they preserve all relevant stuff relative to this case that's on their servers. They're in San Francisco, so you can get to them. It's not like reaching some overseas entity. And they're going to be looking, that is the feds, will be looking for a potential federal nexus, something going across state lines or that implicates a federal statute. And one of the things that could happen here is that if this was a conspiracy, if there were a few people involved and they're communicating by Discord, well, there's your element. There's your operative element of a federal crime, because internet messages go across state lines. It's used for jurisdiction all the time. You have your federal conspiracy case, and that whole thing's in Fedland.
You know, Paul, I also want to quickly tick through some of the messages that we learned were on the bullets, including "Hey, fascist." There was a mention, if you read this, quote, "You are gay, LMAO." Some of them indiscernible messages. We also know that he, in fact, was at a family dinner where he articulated that Charlie Kirk was coming to that campus, that he did not like Charlie Kirk, and that he felt Charlie Kirk was full of hate. That dinner had to have taken place in the last 6 days. That is the timeline in which Charlie Kirk announced this event. I bring up all this information because you've got the conspiracy hook there potentially for federal charges. But what about terrorism? Because some of this points to perhaps having a political motive.
You can call something domestic terrorism without actually charging it. The instances of federal charges being brought for terrorism not involving a foreign entity are as rare as hen's teeth. Almost always you need a foreign entity involved for the federal terrorism charges. So I'm skeptical of getting federal terrorism charges on this, but I don't think it really matters. In fact, I would argue you may be better off with the state charges, because state prosecutors are much more used to doing murder prosecutions, which is essentially what this is. So unless it takes an unexpected turn here, I think that ultimately this devolves to state court, unless I said we get this conspiracy piece. And again, they're going to be pulling in all of this. It'll be interesting to watch how the arraignments go. You'll remember the Mangione thing where they were dueling arraignments. I think a lot of that was because the federal government really didn't trust Alvin Bragg's office to bring that case in. This case, I don't think they'll have those trepidations, so let's see who ends up with the arraignment and who ultimately prosecutes the case.
And of course, the death penalty being an option there in Utah. Paul Mauro, thank you. We'll get back with you. But for now, let's bring in former FBI Assistant Director Chris Swecker. Chris, I want to ask you what is happening right now, because we've learned just a little bit, just a sliver of what the FBI knows. I imagine there are search warrants. I imagine they are pouring through devices, looking through computers, finding anything that could hint at a possible motive or a possible conspiracy.
Right, all of the above. Search warrants at his house, wherever he's, wherever, his car, his mobile device, his laptop, his computer, social media sites, as Paul has pointed out. And I'll reinforce what Paul just said. I agree with him 100%. I think you're going to have to they're trying to find a federal nexus here, but I think they're going to have to shoehorn something in. John can, shed more light on this, but I have scoured the statutes. I cannot find one that actually fits here that would carry the same gravity and death sentence that a Utah state first-degree murder charge would bring. So, and they're also in the process now. We've moved from manhunt to prosecution. We're going to build a prosecution here, match the forensic evidence with the subject, talk to people, harvest all that computer forensics, electronic forensics. All that takes time. And, he has 3 days to go before the formal charges are filed in Utah. So there's a little bit of time there. But I really, really don't think we're going to see a federal crime charged here that carries the same gravity and certainty that you would have in Utah under a state charge.
Chris, last hour, 2 hours ago rather, Jim Trusty mentioned, an attorney, that there was not a prosecutor that he saw at that press conference, and that was strategic. And they strategically put out the evidence in a way that, did due diligence to what the public needs to know, but regarding and keeping mindfulness of the sanctity of the prosecution, he noted. If you're an FBI agent, how do you determine what the public should know and what you hold back?
Yeah, and I'm also a former state prosecutor, so I look at it from both angles. And you have to have a lot of discipline at this stage of the proceedings to make sure that you're not giving more information than you should. I mean, there are federal guidelines, the U.S. Attorney's Manual and Department of Justice guidelines lay out what you can put out there at this stage of the proceedings, and it's pretty bare bones information. You don't want your witnesses getting their information from the media, and you don't want to feed details that aren't necessary to feed to certain witnesses. You want them to have their own recollection. So you don't want to so-called taint the prosecution in any way. You err on the side of caution. So I am a little bit surprised there wasn't a prosecutor there, because they should be there to kind of pull back on the reins if they need to. The last thing you want to do at this juncture is jeopardize a prosecution.
Chris, a final question to you. There was talk this morning from the President of the United States, some details about the family member that turned Tyler Robinson in. That came, we now know, at the evening of September 11th. We've seen a lot of cases where there are family members that cover for their children, in particular parents, hide their children. Based on what the president said, it seems like perhaps the father was involved in keeping this individual detained and ultimately turning him over. The big break was a family member who came forward.
Yeah, and apparently the father is a sheriff's deputy. So this is not unheard of, but it's actually the best possible scenario here, based on, and that's what they were shooting for when they put out that information and the photos and all of that, was someone close to him got the information to the right people, and they foreclosed a shootout or a suicide. So this family member did this out of compassion for the person, for their son or their loved one. So this is hard to do. You can imagine the gut-wrenching decision that they had to make, but it was the right thing to do. And I've seen it happen before, but it is fairly rare, as you pointed out. But this is what we wanted to happen.
Yeah, and last night, we were anticipating a press conference, and I was sitting there in for Jesse Waters, and I was told we're camera chasing down a street, and now it was 250 miles away. That would have been a ton of camera chasing. That was indeed happening. But now we know that it was a father, a family member that excuse me one moment in my ear, there was a family member that made that big break. Thank you very much, Chris Swecker.
Thank you.